I think we're recording, so welcome everyone to the Safeguarding Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Just the one thing on the agenda. Welcome to Tina Clements from the Prosperous Committee. We thought it would be useful for her to come along. And we'll start straight off with item 1 then. Apologies.
Apologies this afternoon, Chair, from Mrs Eagland, Mrs Perry and Mr Wilcox.
Thank you. Item
Chair?
2, any...
Sorry to interrupt, but are we quorate?
Yeah, I'm told we are, yeah.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah. Item 2, declarations of interest. No. Item 3, minutes of the last meeting held on the 14th of September. Has everyone had the chance to read them and happy that I signed them as a true and accurate record? Thank you. Item 4, strategic vision for early years, report of Cabinet Member, Children and Young People. Councillor Sutton.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. It is afternoon, isn't it? Good afternoon, everyone. Take this opportunity just to come and update and seek your feedback, thoughts, comments on our strategic vision for the early years service going forward. And I'm joined by Natasha on my left and Helen on my right, which will do the actual presentation and answer any sort of technically sort of questions that you get. This opportunity for us arose really following our decision to bring back certain elements of Entrust back into house, including the early years team that now come under Natasha's line management. So as it says, it's it's a presentation, slides of which Natasha and Helen will go through, and it details the principles of our proposed reorganisation of the service and the planned budget profile going forward for the service and the costs. So without further ado, if that's okay, I'll hand over to Natasha and Helen.
Thanks, Mark, and good afternoon, everybody. So we just thought it might be helpful to kind of draw your attention to some of the key things that are in the report. So hopefully you will all remember that Staffordshire County Council's corporate plan has got a very clear priority around every child in Staffordshire having the best start in life and achieve their potential, and this item specifically relates to that particular outcome on the corporate plan. And actually it's something that both Helen and I are very passionate about. So the paper that we're going to put in front of you today is kind of made up of two things. So it's one, how we kind of contributing towards that corporate plan, but also how we're responding and adapting to some of the changes that we're seeing both nationally and locally. So we thought it might be helpful to just draw your attention to a number of announcements that have come really from central government around how they're going to change the early education entitlements moving forward. So for those of you that haven't seen, government have made a decision to increase the childcare entitlements, and we've detailed those on the slide there, and I think they're also contained within the report for those of you that might not be able to see it. It does mean that we're going to see more children being able to take up early education entitlements from a much younger age. So you can see there that we've never previously had to start to work with children from 9 months old, and that will be a requirement to try and assist parents back to work. So we've outlined what we think that will look like in terms of the timetable. For those youngest children, that won't actually start until September 2024. But actually for some of those children, it will start as soon as now, really. In addition to that, we just thought there were some local factors that were kind of going on to play. And so as Mark kind of alluded to before, so we in Staffordshire had a small early education team. And Helen previously headed up that team, and it was a very, very small team of people that looked after things like the Family Information Service, the Ofsted feeds from Ofsted to make sure that we knew about the quality of the settings, making sure that we had good information, advice and guidance, and also building and maintaining that relationship with the old Entrust early years team. And over in Entrust, we had some teams who supported kind of 4 key functions really. So there was a team that did special educational needs inclusion service, so they really supported early years settings to be as inclusive as possible, to make sure that children who'd got special educational needs had got the assistance they needed to make sure that they could provide a service of support for those children. They had a team that supported with the sufficiency and market development, so for those of you that don't know, the local authority's got a responsibility around making sure that there's sufficient provision in the market, so making sure that anyone who does want to access childcare can access it. So that was one of the other functions that the team had. They looked after the quality support settings, so the settings themselves are responsible for the day-to-day management of the settings, but we would go in and offer quality support and advice to the settings around good practice, how to improve practice, particularly if they'd fallen into a category. So if a setting had been visited by Ofsted and they were inadequate or requires improvement, we would go in and do a support package so that their quality of provision would improve. And actually we've had considerable success in that area. The quality of the provision in Staffordshire is good. And the final aspect of support was around training and development. Now when this sat in trust, a lot of that training and development would have been charged for, so the settings would have had to pay, for example, to go on a course, to learn something more about early communication, say, and actually the settings would find that particularly difficult because the funding rates for the entitlements are quite low. So those are the kind of key elements of service. And I suppose going back to the original point, so when the team first transferred back into Staffordshire County Council in April 2023, we realised that actually these teams were really disparate. So even though there was those 4 teams sitting together, so the SEND team, the sufficiency team, the quality support and the training team, they all kind of delivering one early years service and in trust. They didn't know each other, they didn't speak to each other, they didn't work with each other on a day-to-day basis. So what we did when they came back is we realised that actually we'd inherited 16 staff in a fairly flat structure with no line management responsibility, no connection really amongst them, no understanding of where it was they were trying to get to, but actually the way in which they worked was there was a service delivery agreement with the local authority that tasked them to do particular functions and they would go away and do that function. So it was very, very function specific. It didn't really think, I suppose, you know, kind of taking it from a perspective of working in Staffordshire County Council, we will always start with where is it we're trying to get to and how do we all contribute. That wasn't the kind of same way of working over in trust. So we inherited a flat team with some really undefined roles. Some of the job descriptions say things like, you know, answer the phone or whatever. They're not really thinking about, again, that common purpose, where is it we're trying to get to. The job roles are very different from what you'd expect to see in Staffordshire County Council. Some of the responsibilities that we need from that service weren't necessarily defined. So we do a lot of work to support settings to make sure that they're safe and that the practice in those settings is safe. And while somebody had taken on that role because they were a suitable individual and kind of had it within their gift to kind of advise settings, it wasn't really defined in terms of their roles and responsibilities. And the culture was very much one of awaiting direction. So I'll wait till I'm told what to do, and then I'll go and do something. And it was very much orientated towards those key performance indicators that were in place through that service delivery agreement. So a very, very different structure and team and way of working than we currently practice in Staffordshire County Council. There was no kind of curiosity or independence of thought. It was very much focused on, this is the thing you've got to deliver, and therefore I'll go and deliver it. And what we'd seen from that team in trust is that actually their focus had been very much around making profit, and actually sometimes that had meant that they'd reduced resilience. So where, for example, somebody had left naturally because they'd found another job, they might not have replaced that individual. So over time, actually, there was reduced resilience in that team. I suppose we inherited them in April, and that became quite apparent to us quite quickly. At the same time, the government were announcing these kind of new entitlements. So quickly, we responded to that by appointing an early years lead, which Helen has joined us today, has been appointed to. And then we started to have a conversation about what we were going to do about this team, the fact that we'd got 2 teams, one that used to be in Staffordshire County Council, one that was in trust, bringing those 2 teams together, starting to develop that shared way of working that contributed towards the corporate plan and also allowed us to respond to some of those national changes that were happening. So Helen and I have been working quite hard really on trying to make sure that we've got that culture that's starting to develop amongst the team, where they understand their roles, their responsibilities, how they're contributing. And I have to say that's probably gone more positively than I imagined. The staff have been really positive about coming back to Stafford County Council. They're really excited to be contributing towards that vision. They're really excited to see that they've got something that allows them to be independent and curious about the work and try and innovate and create new solutions so that children have got the best start possible. And so actually, most of the team have started to kind of work and adapt to working in Stafford County Council very, very well. That hasn't been an easy task. We've had to put a lot of time into making sure that they can come together and orientate themselves and have those difficult conversations, but actually it feels like that's gone fairly well, really. So as a result of that kind of engagement with staff, we've started to pull together, I suppose, a view really around we need to reorganise and restructure that service. We don't think the current service is fit for purpose, especially given the flat nature of the team and the lack of resilience in some of those sub-teams. So, for example, if we're looking at a larger number of children being able to access their entitlements, we absolutely need, people on the ground maximising the range of settings that are available so that actually we can respond to that increased demand. So that team, particularly the market development team, is very, very small. There's probably only 3 members of staff in that team. So we need to do something to kind of give some of those teams some of that resilience that's needed to be able to adapt to the changes that are coming. So what we've done is we've put together a proposal really around principles. So when we went and spoke to People Services and we talked to them about the fact we wanted to restructure, they said it was really important to get both Scrutiny and Cabinet to buy into the principles in terms of the ways in which we want to work with that service, to allow us to go away and design that kind of service structure that would be fit for purpose. So we are proposing a number of different principles really as part of this way of working. So we think that the team need to align with that early help agenda. We came and talked to, I think, last year around the early help strategy and how that would work. And actually, we think this team are part of that very earliest help, making sure that the community is resilient and independent and able to operate as inclusively as possible so that children's need can be met as soon as possible. We also have started to do a lot of work on family hubs, which we're coming to talk to you about in November. And we see this team as needing to play into that district-based footprint. So we think that they should be a visible presence within that family hub in that locality. We think that they should have more of a finger on the pulse kind of approach really in terms of the settings that might be in those respective districts or boroughs. So that's one of the principles. We want to plan and implement the extended entitlements. We want to do that well. We've always been particularly proud of the way in which Staffordshire delivers in its early years. We are, in the upper quartiles for most of the good level of development, access to take up, and also kind of making sure that the quality of the provision is good, and we want to maintain that with the new provision that's coming on board. We want to continue to improve the quality of provision. We want to do more work to increase the take-up of entitlements. We want to make sure that more children are identified and supported with SEND. We've got a number of children who are coming up, particularly following COVID, where actually there is developmental delay. They've not had some of those same opportunities, and we want to make sure that settings are able to support those with inclusive practice within the settings so that actually that gap can be narrowed. And we want to make sure that the settings are able to support and deliver a more effective early intervention. And we want to particularly build on some of the successes we've had with something we piloted just before COVID, actually, called Early Outcomes Fund. So Early Outcomes Fund was a kind of project that was funded by Department for Education. 14 local authorities managed to get some funding. Staffordshire got some of that money. And we decided to pilot kind of 2 key projects which we think are really, really important. So the first one you might have seen, well, I hope you've seen, is Hungry Little Minds. So that's basically a campaign that's directed at parents to try and make sure that they have got the information, advice and guidance that they need to make sure that they can support their child as independently as possible. So they'll get some tailored messages around their role as a parent, what they can do to support a child, but also some practical ideas about places in their local community that might be able to offer a parent and toddler group or something like that they might want to take up. The other part of the Early Outcomes Fund that we funded was a programme called the Early Communication Screening Toolkit. So I don't know if any of you have heard of it, but Stoke were held up in the Early Outcomes Fund as one of the areas that did something quite innovative called Stoke Speaks Out. And we worked with Stoke as a local authority to try and pilot that approach, but working across Staffordshire. So it basically takes some tools and techniques really out to the settings and encourages them to be effective at identifying where children might have developmental delay when it comes to their communication skills. It encourages them to take up some really practical suggestions around how they might improve that within the setting, but also have some of those conversations with parents so that actually parents understand the role that they play in talking to their child more frequently. Because actually we know that the communication gap is as a direct result of the number of words spoken to a child, so it really doesn't matter too much what you're saying to the child as long as you're speaking positively and kind of regularly really to your child. That will make a significant difference. So as part of this approach, we want to utilise some of the money to keep those things that we were temporarily funded for on a longer term basis. So that's the plan for that. So these are the principles that we've pulled together. These kind of build on the work that was done as part of the children's transformation. So we've taken the ones that are most pertinent really for the early years sector. So we want to make sure that the practice is child-centred. We want to maintain that restorative practice, which is really about having those high support, high challenge conversations so that actually parents and settings are encouraged to do the right thing, to be ambitious for our children and make sure that they are having those difficult conversations sometimes to make sure that those outcomes for children are maintained. We want to make sure that we've got strong leadership both within the council and across our settings. We want to make sure that we have a culture that is one that we would want to see, where we're welcoming and also embodies the values of Staffordshire County Council in terms of being ambitious, courageous and empowered. We want to make sure that we're ambitious about the quality of practice that we see in our settings and the outcomes that our children achieve. And we want to make sure that we've got a skilled and flexible team who actually can make sure that they are accountable and responsible for their delivery. And actually can respond to some of this changing need on a more agile basis, particularly based in those local district and boroughs. And we want to make sure that that service is thinking about continuous improvement, not because they're directed to, but because they can see it in front of them and they know that there's a need to kind of improve their practice. So that's the thing really we're seeking feedback on. Do they feel like the right principles, or actually do you think we've missed something? And as part of the discussion, I thought it might be helpful just to tell you what our kind of staff have said really. So we've been quite open with staff about the fact that we think we need to change. I think they acknowledge the fact that we need to change. They personally think from a kind of individual perspective that there's been a lot of staffing issues that have been unresolved for some time. So I think they're feeling quite positive about the fact that things that will need to change. They agree with the vision and the priorities that we've outlined. They can see how they could contribute towards making those outcomes better. They can see actually how that reduction in capacity has meant that the team is quite fragile in terms of being able to respond to the government requirements. So they're keen to make sure that they've got the right resilience and right support in the team, and also are keen to upskill themselves individually so that they're better able to support the sector. They think that working in that local community is really important. They feel like when they worked in Trust, being based in the centre of Stafford, they didn't necessarily have that connection with the community, which they think is important. And also they think it's important that we develop a service that does continually kind of build that professional development and collaboration with the settings. And I think the next part we've just included, so this is an indicative budget breakdown. So this budget is basically delegated by Schools Forum to Staffordshire County Council. It comes from the Early Years Dedicated Schools grant, so there's a specific part of the pot which is dedicated to early years. That amount of money is given to the local authority to make sure that we can deliver those early years services. That 1.827 million is the amount of money that we get from Schools Forum every year to deliver these services. And our proposal is to split that so that we've got much more support in terms of that funding sufficiency and market development. As I said before, that's probably the smallest part of our team, but the one we think needs to grow the most in order to be able to respond to the government changes. We do anticipate, in addition to this early years dedicated schools grant, that we will get additional grants that come from central government, although we don't anticipate that they'll be built into this longer term funding plan. So we're trying to make sure that the team is sustainable by making sure that that funding proposal covers what we'll need in the future. Therefore, if we do get additional grants that come in from central government for ad hoc pieces of work, they'll probably be used for development capacity as opposed to funding the actual team. And I think that's it, unless there's any questions.
Thank you for that. I suppose just a couple of things. First of all, I thought the principles look right. I'll wait to see if anyone else comments on those. I think that sort of general picture that you paint about a team coming over that didn't seem to have sort of focus and direction. And then you talked about staff engagement and the staff understand, and then some ambitions. If we have control of this team and these are our principles, do you think that the language should be a bit stronger around that? Should not ambition, should they be essentials? Should we be measuring that and ensure that it happens? And while staff, I think, used the phrase understand from the engagement, I just wonder whether, given the fact that, and it was encouraging to hear that the culture was improving when you described it, I think the success of this process will depend on that team delivering, won't it? And I just wonder whether, because we've inherited a team that probably weren't performing particularly well, and there might have been reasons for that, of course, and that's not to be negative around those as individuals. But I'm assuming that we now have complete control and it's down to us to deliver what we want.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Councillor Spence. So we have the team within our gift, so they're all managed by Helen. I actually think we've got a lot of individuals within that team who actually have got incredible potential and capability. I think some of that's been hidden by the fact that they haven't been managed particularly well. I think they're kind of over kind of zealousness really around making sure that they complied with the SDA meant that they didn't actually think about that broader vision for the team. So I feel confident that actually the team, are open to the change and actually will deliver that change well. I think they need some increased capacity, which is what this reorganisation will do. It will build some of that capacity. But I feel like we're starting from a good position. And again, maybe that's one to come back and check on. In a couple of months' time once the change has been delivered, so that actually you're assured that it's kind of landed safely.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I thought absolutely right. It seems like we put a lot of eggs in this one basket, and we've now inherited people. And under normal circumstances, we would have gone out, wouldn't we, for interview and go getting people. And it is encouraging that you talked about how the team were developing, responding well. Councillor Snape.
Thank you, Chair. The first thing is really, you get what you pay for in life. So everything costs money. The more we ask for, the more it's going to cost. My daughter-in-law is a finance manager for a nursery. And the date, this has all been the press from the government as publicity and stuff. They're getting abuse because people think it started last week. They want this. The nurseries are getting about £4 an hour. And people then have got to man it up themselves is the best way. People aren't saying they can't afford to do it. So a few questions really from that. Have you spoken for nurseries and have you taken their feedback when they talk about the staffing costs, etc.? Because if we're asking for SEN, whatever, perhaps babies who are not nappy change going in on year September 24, it's going to perhaps need 2 or 3 staff per child, really, as opposed to the current. You say about no independence of thought in relation to young children with the previous. Well, Entrust also deal with our schools. Are we reviewing how they treat our schools? Because if we're not spending time doing this, are we then doing the same for the schools? Are we being given a second-class service? Should we be reviewing this as well as a committee to see if they're doing the same for that? And the final thing is really, we talk about staff who don't want to change. What are we going to do with those? Are they going to remain in post, redundancy, or are we going to get rid of them? Because if somebody doesn't want to buy into this, then I'm sorry, we've got to get rid of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sutton.
I'll start. At a party conference, I was fortunate enough to take part with my LGA hat on at a fringe event that was attended by lots of providers about childcare, and was fortunate to sit next to a Member of Parliament who's dedicated probably the last 3 or 4 years of her life to extending this entitlement. That's just a little bit of background. There is no doubt from the first time that I got involved in anything to do with this that providers have always spoken to us about the rate that is passported to them. The rates are set by national government. We have a role in doing that, and I have spoken to and written to on a number of occasions previously to ministers and Secretary of State about what we believe is the rate being too low in Staffordshire, particularly in comparison to some of our adjoining authorities. So we've made lots of representations for that. And at Schools Forum, when I first attended, I was continually bombarded by the rep from the sector about this. Now, I think under the leadership of Helen and others, I think we have an extremely good relationship with our providers, and I think that's borne out by the fact that during and after COVID, the person that was in charge of our side of that then, who isn't there now, is moved on to other things, was in conversation with me, on a very, very regular basis. But we've worked with them, and is it monthly the meeting you have? Quarterly meeting that I get invited to. I can't always attend, but we have that at early evenings, don't we, generally, so that the providers can come to those things. So I'm fairly confident that we have a really, really good relationship, and I think that's shown by the fact that post-COVID, we've had a particularly low rate of providers failing in comparison to other places. But I absolutely accept that the rate that nurseries get is not makes it particularly difficult for them, and particularly if they're not able to cross-subsidise. And one issue that has cropped up, and Helen or Natasha will, tell me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that the market in under twos has dropped because more parents are staying at home and thinking they can look after little Johnny or Jill while they're working. And then if that funding for nurseries drops to a certain level, they can't afford to do it for anybody. So there is a resilience issue there that the team work on, but that impacts on the overall efficiency of the nursery. So there's lots and lots of moving parts to this, and I think that's particularly why the government were keen to introduce this over a number of stages, and it didn't all come in absolute one go. But I'd welcome anything else from either Helen or Natasha on that.
Just in support of Mark and the team, really, I've had discussion with my daughter over. If, say, you want to put your child into one of the nurseries, you've often got to buy the whole week's places. You can't just buy 2 or 3 days. So if a woman or a man wants to go back to work part-time, they've still got to buy the whole places. And so the nurseries themselves and the providers have got to look at that. Because they are getting money, I suppose, really book-she, where people could stay at home, look after children themselves, but they've still got to pay them. So it's just a matter to be fair, for me to be fair with you as well, so to come from that side.
I suppose just to add to that, Councillor Snape, the rate that Staffordshire gets is on the funding floor, so we are literally bottom. But we do take a number of steps, and again, this is credit to Helen and the team really, where we won't necessarily retain money, particularly for the Think 2 children, because we know that the rate is so low. So we try and make sure that we're maximising every single penny we're paying to the sector, so that actually they do see it in their back pocket. And I do actually think that some of the suggestions that we're making, particularly around the expansion of the Early Outcomes Fund and making sure that they've got access to that continued professional development, actually will be supportive really for the setting, because they won't have to be paying for that support. It means that they'll get access to that CPD. That means that the children can be well supported, and again that's kind of paid for through that centrally retained pot as opposed to something they have to pay for in addition. So again, we are in continual conversations through the early years reference group to make sure that we get that right and get that temperature check, and they are very, very vocal in telling us if we don't get it right, so we continue to listen to them, and as Mark said, are very vocal in terms of making representation nationally on that issue. I suppose there was another question around the entrust in the schools relationship. My understanding of that is that it works very differently, partly because of the academisation of schools, so a lot of that is bought directly from schools. But yeah, I think the offer that they provide now is significantly different, but I'm sure Tim Moss would be able to come and kind of talk to you about that. And in terms of staff who don't want to change, that's always a difficulty, isn't it, with change? I mean, we've tried really hard to make sure that people know that it's coming, that they understand why we're doing it. We've even brought in some additional capacity to try and help us to do that OD piece around the making sure that they understand the rationale for change and all of that kind of stuff. But ultimately, people will make decisions about whether or not this is the organisation they want to work for, and whether or not they believe in the ethos and the vision we're striving for. And if they don't, I'm sure they will choose with their feet. I have to say I'm pretty confident, though, that there is the people out there to be able to do these roles. We went out to advert earlier on in the year for one of the jobs in the team, and we got over 90 applicants. So I think actually we've got that resilience more broadly, that actually if some people do leave, there might be other people who might want that as a potential opportunity in the future.
Thank you for that. Councillor McMahon.
Thank you. But before I ask my questions, I'm a bit confused now. Is this money from government going to pay for the whole of the child's provision, or will there still be supplements from the family? If you would answer that question, then I will.
So the increased entitlements will see the government pay some of the costs for children that they haven't previously paid for. There will still be some children who could be subsidised, so if you go back to work earlier, or actually the timeline for entitlements is different, where actually it doesn't come on until September 2024, there may still be some parental contribution towards that.
The reason I ask is that there's some school of thought which I don't, I think I don't subscribe to, and that's that the welfare of children in the long run is best if they spend the first couple of years with their mother rather than going to nurseries. So the question is this simply open to working mothers or working parents, let's put it that way, or even those who aren't working, can they avail themselves of this opportunity and be there with their child? Because that covers both contingencies. I mean, the idea of a child at a very early age seeing more of the world, seeing more people, learning to interact with other people, I think is a huge positive. But this school of thought about the first couple of years at home is not without merit. It's a balancing act. It's not straightforward. The second issue is I want to commend you about taking on the folk from Entrust and what you've done. It strikes me that the whole culture must have been flat in more sense than one, shall we say. And my final point, which picks up from Paul really, and that's do we have a contingency plan in our back pocket for significant market failure? For instance, an arm's length arrangement, the way that we do for social care. Because these people, parents will become dependent on this because of work commitments. And if there's a market failure of some substance, it will have an impact on the local economy and the welfare of the child and all that sort of stuff. And I just think that rather than have to rush into how we're going to manage this on a Friday afternoon or a Monday morning, we actually have something that we can say, well, in the instance of market failure, this is what we're going to do. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, so a couple of things then. So In terms of the entitlements, I've just put that slide back up, Councillor Mahon, which hopefully demonstrates that it is eligible for working parents. Now, I'm quite interested to see how this rolls out because I don't think a lot of parents will take it up for the younger children. I mean, one of the key reasons we get when it's the 2-year-old entitlement is parents will say they're too young to go to a setting. So it'll be interesting to see the parental response to this because I don't think it will be as unilateral perhaps as other entitlements like 3- and 4-year-olds, for example. So it is for working parents. I think there's an element of kind of realism around the level of take-up from parents once it gets to that point, but we'll just have to see how that goes. And we are planning for a proportion of those taking up that entitlement, and we're erring on the side of caution. I suppose in terms of the contingency plan, so this has recently been tested. So we've been currently working with an organisation who've been providing childcare in some of our children's centres, and that provider decided that they were going to terminate the lease arrangement with the children's centre and actually wanted to go and close that setting. We went out to market with that particular provider. Again, it's a massive credit to Helen's team, really. They've got a really good team. We've got local connections with really good providers who deliver good quality provision. And successfully, we appointed an alternative provider to move into those spaces and continue to provide that childcare. That isn't to say, you know, that market failure on a grander scale isn't something that we are kind of watching and minded to kind of have an eye to. And that's one of the reasons why on the slide we want to make sure that we've got increased capacity in terms of that funding sufficiency and market development, because we think in the team at the moment we've got some really good relationships with some really great providers, and we are having constant conversations about their sustainability and their ability to manage, and providing some really constructive conversations actually around, you know, how they can maximise their sustainability. But we think we need more of that, and we think we need more of that particularly because of the increased entitlement starting from an early age and the ability of the setting not therefore being able to cross-subsidise as much. So that's one of the reasons why we've increased that team significantly, to make sure that we can plan for and have that resilience in Staffordshire. I think, as we said in the presentation, though, we are fortunate in that we were commended recently by Ofsted at our regional conversation with them about the fact that we hadn't seen the same level of closures as other local authorities. So I think that gives us some assurance that actually the team are doing the right kind of things. We just need a bit more of it.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just perhaps add to that nationally, I think the figures are at 7% for closures across all providers, whereas in Staffordshire we're under 3%. So as a result of that sufficiency and market development team we've got, who work really closely with providers and help with that business modelling and different opportunities that settings might look at, I think we have, and our relationships with them, I think we have been able to help that lower level of closures than's being seen nationally.
Thank you for that. Councillor McMahon, did you want to come back? Or have you?
Only to say what I'm picking up is not so much that you have a contingency plan if things fail, but your relationship with these organisations, it's such that that you should be able to see a problem quite far out. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bardesh.
Thank you, Chair. Just two very quick comments. It's a no-brainer that if we're offering more free childcare places, then we should also be offering a substantial increase in funding at the same time. And it's terribly sad and unacceptable to read that in Stafford, which is the area that I know best, that 5 closures of nurseries which were rated good and outstanding have closed. We can't recreate them overnight, and we need to be doing everything we can to hold on to them. Secondly, if we don't pay for this now, we're going to be paying for this in more ways than one in the not too distant future. Nurseries are amongst the places which are good at picking up on healthcare issues, family support. So there's that preventative work that takes place in nurseries as well. lastly, this announcement of an expansion of free places has been very misleading to our members of our community, and either the government doesn't understand or is in denial of the serious issues that are faced by the early years sector right now. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, thank you for that. Did you want to comment?
Yes, just in response to the point you made about Stafford, we are seeing some closures across the county, but also in response to some of those closures, we're seeing other provisions set up in the same location. So we are able to offer support where settings have closed to be able to put in as soon as possible another provision if we feel it can be sustainable and there is the market demand. So we measure, we have what we call our 8-6 agendas. So we're regularly monitoring ward by ward the number of children, the number of places required and the number of vacancies. So what we wouldn't do is want to actually set up a provision where there wasn't the number of children in the locality to take up those places, hence making the provision unsustainable. So it really is a seesaw that we keep our eye on all the time, weekly. We're regularly looking at that. So we would really help if we were getting into our sort of parent feed, a real response that there was a need for childcare in a particular area, we would really look at that. But one of the things that we have found, despite the closures that we have had in Staffordshire, we provide a service to parents where we're able to help them locate alternative childcare, and we haven't had any instances where we haven't been able to source childcare for a parent. We might not be able to source their first choice, but we've always been able to find an alternative childcare place for those parents. So in the light of sort of what you were saying particularly about Stafford, we will be looking at that area specifically, and if there is a need in that community, we will be talking with our providers that we know offer a good or outstanding service to be able to set up or expand. Or if it's a small demand, we'll be working really closely with our childminders. So we really monitor that sort of open and closures to ensure we can meet those community needs. Thank you.
Oh, that's really encouraging to hear that we have that detailed understanding and importantly helping those establishments where the need is. Councillor, did you want to come back, Councillor Pardesh, or not? No. Thank you. Councillor Burnett Faulkner.
Thank you, Chair. There's a couple of things I'm concerned about. I've got 2 primary schools in my area in Kidsgrove because I'm in the north, and they've got nurseries attached to the primary school. And because the uptake isn't as good as it used to be because of these restrictions that have been put in place, i.e. they've got to have full-time nursery when they only want 2 or 3 days. So they either can't afford to take the child or they've had to give up the job. And so the nurseries become a bit smaller, and consequently reception has also come a bit smaller as well. So now what they're doing is blending classes, and I don't really agree with that. I think they're pushing some of the little ones up into reception. They're holding some of the reception ones that aren't very clever back from going into year 1. And it's just not working. There's a lot of parents that are very upset about this and concerned. One of the schools Ofsted's actually been into because one of the parents wrote to them and complained about this, and they've had to revert back some of the things that they've put in place. And this is an academy-run schools, and also they've got rid of a lot of their one-to-one teaching assistants that they had with the special needs people, and I don't know how they've managed to do that. They've obviously found some loophole somewhere in the system, and these children, I don't feel, are now getting the support that they were before. Is there anything we can do about that?
So I suppose there's a couple of things I can say. So we've got a really good response really as a team where we have a meeting with a number of people who work across settings who might carry some intelligence. So they might, for example, process the payments to settings, they might go in and do some support to settings, they might provide some support around children with disabilities. We triangulate that information with the intelligence we've got around their Ofsted grading and other kind of data and information that we've got available at our fingertips, and we use that to provide support. So Where there's a setting that might be causing us concern in terms of their practice, we're usually pretty hot at picking that up. But we can take that intelligence from anywhere. So if people have got settings that are causing them concern or they're worried about practice, then by all means contact the team. We'll provide the email address to Helen for the Family Information Service so that you can report those in. And if we need to, we'll go out and provide some visits and support. I can't comment on the individual school because I don't know who it is, but we'll certainly pick that up outside of the meeting if that's okay.
Thank you for that. Did you want to come back?
Okay, that's great, thank you. And I'll be interested to see. I'm actually at a meeting of the Kids Grove Hub tomorrow morning, so I'll see if I can find out for you how the staff are getting on with all the new changes.
Councillor Geller.
Thank you, Chairman, and sorry for my lateness, thanks to traffic lights. Can I say, first of all, thank you for all the good work you're doing with the children, and I'm so passionate about early intervention and giving them as much help as I possibly can. Can you just give me a little bit of understanding about this Hungry Little Minds campaign, please, and where the money is spent and what's, you know, a little bit of feedback? Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So Hungry Little Minds is something that was set up when we were funded by the DFE to deliver the Early Outcomes Fund. It's actually something that's featured in Children and Young People now, so we can circulate a link about it if that would be helpful to members. Basically, it's a campaign where a parent can sign up to get some push notifications, so at particular moments in time. So if you put the date of birth of the child in, so say for example you're due to give birth in a couple of weeks, you'd put the date in and it will literally send you push notifications that might be particularly relevant at that particular time. So for example, it might say you might start to notice your baby's head turn at this time, a game that you can play with the child is X, and actually here's local provision in Kids Grove that actually you can go and visit actually that will help stimulate that child's development. So it's been a really great campaign. We've had a number of parents signing up. I'm sure Helen probably got the number at her fingertips compared to me who doesn't, but we've had a number of people signing up, and what's particularly pleasing about that is that actually we've seen a number of families sign up, not only from families that we'd expect to see signing up, but actually those that might need that extra little help. And actually what we've seen is the total number of people signing up from those communities that might be more disadvantaged has been similar to what we'd see across the county. So that's been really positive that actually we're getting those messages to the people who we think might need them most. But absolutely anyone can access it. And again, we'll send the link and the information to you all so that you can promote that with parents who might be in the local community that you represent.
Councillor Sutton.
Just very quickly, and I've just shared you the link and I've copied Helen into it, so that can be circulated.
Thank you.
So just add to that to say the number's 5,000 parents that have signed up, and we've also done some evaluation with parents about what they like about the programme, what's been beneficial in the impact, but also what they would like to see. So we're actually due to review and revamp a little bit in the very near future, and the project has a really high engagement rate compared to most sort of corporate campaigns. So it's been really, really positive.
Thank you for that. No other questions. Oh, Councillor Walman.
I should also apologise for my lateness. I won't blame it on traffic lights. I was actually late. So this is obviously an interesting topic because I have a 3.5-week baby at home. And I don't know, you might have seen me change in complexion because I'm absolutely shattered, and that's partly the reason why I'm late, but obviously this is of interest. We talked about the data that you already have about the provision that's already out there, which is good, that we at least have a kind of a baseline. In terms of forecasting placements going forward, presumably we've done some analysis on that. And what is that looking like, and how much as a percentage rise would that have across by ward?
So, Conor, I can't remember when you came in, so I don't know if you heard me talking about the sufficiency, but one of the things the local authority has to do is it has to maintain a sufficiency statement. So we have to understand, have we got sufficient provision for the number of children who might need places? And so one of the ways we do that is by talking to the settings. So we send out a sufficiency tool that we ask them to complete that basically gives us a load of information that helps us to identify where settings have got demand and capacity issues. We're really lucky. Are we at 99% or yeah, 99? It was 100. We're at 99% of settings return that information to the local authority. And again, I think that probably pays testament to the relationship we've got with the providers. And they give us all of that information that helps us then to forecast what we think the demand looks like over the coming 12 months. As part of the expansion of the entitlements, we've also asked some questions about their ability to step up and scale up. So again, that's information that's at the fingertips of Helen. And we do publish, again, externally, which we're more than happy to share with you.
We're happy with that? All right, yeah. Right, Councillor McMahon.
I hope I'm not stealing your thunder, Connor, but there's a little addition to that, which I think is worthwhile. Do we know what the birth rates are like, whether they're falling or rising, and therefore, what do we predict the need is for, well, for 6 months' time, or for or over the next few years, so we know what we're looking for and what the demand might look like?
Yeah, so the local authority actually gets live birth data, so for every baby that's born, including yours, Connor, we'll have had the information that comes into the local authority, and we do use that. We know that the data is fairly stagnant. In some districts it's dipping, and in some districts it's rising. So we know that East Staffs, for example, is an area of growth, and some of the other districts like Newcastle and Stafford might be areas that aren't seeing the same level of growth. So yeah, we do have that data that comes into local authority.
Councillor Warman, did you have a second question?
Just on finances rather than anything else, and there's that table which is on there, and that you were talking about the market development piece, and I think it says in the report that those current allocations will rise as government funding is provided, and that will be allocated accordingly. Is there a risk that the government don't come forward with these additional grants that are mentioned in the paragraph 50? And does that then have potential implications if we can't expand the team?
So the way in which we've organised the budget is so that we've used the funding we've definitely got available to structure the team. So that is a given. So that budget there comes every year. It's pretty much as sure can be. And actually, we've used that to kind of develop what we think the structure needs to look like moving forward. I think, from memory, we've already had the grant letter to give us the grant determination for one of the funding allocations already last week or this week. So I think the money is coming, and we expect it to be there. The sustainability of it we don't know about, and so that's why we're making sure that we've got the team we need in place to be able to deliver the entitlements moving forward, and anything extra is really a bonus to do some of that development stuff that might be nice to have as opposed to, what we actually need.
All very reassuring. Thank you.
Thank you for that. No more questions. No. Can I just quickly then run through what the recommendations have been asked of this committee? I won't go through them all in great detail. It is to endorse the strategic vision for the early years service, endorse the principles for the proposed reorganisation of early years service, delegate authority to the Director of Children's Services in consultation with a lead member for children and young people and the lead member for education, and send to approve the final staffing structure, and finally to endorse the planned budget profile for early years service. Are we happy with those? Yeah. Lovely. Thank you very much, and thanks for coming along and explaining it. That's been really useful. Thank you. And I'll close the meeting there. Stand by, I won't close the meeting. We go on to item 5 and the work programme. Ellen, could you take us through that?
Thank you, Chair. So very quickly, first of all, can I thank everybody for making it out to a 12:30 meeting? I know it's a very unusual start, but it was to accommodate really timescales so that we can make sure that this item was ready for when it goes to Cabinet. And also, you've obviously got the meeting in a minute with the Commissioner. The next formal meeting is on the 23rd of November. You've got placement sufficiency going to that one. You've got the work of the Family Improvement Boards. You've got an item looking at trading standards and with a specific reference to the safeguarding concerns around vaping. And we've also got 2 items that we've been asked to add to the January meeting on top of what we've already got. which are, again, pre-decision scrutiny items. So this is a change to the work, additions to the work programme. One is on the family help pilot, and the other is on provision of services for children and young people. So those will be added to January. So I'm afraid to say January and November quite full meetings.
Thank you for that, Helen. I did send an email yesterday to the other chairs of the other meetings because I'm getting quite a few requests now for some of these reports. And I struggle sometimes to see where the safeguarding element is. And I think given the fact that that sort of time is precious, I just want to make sure that we're doing that properly. So just for your information, we can have that conversation about what it should look like and where some of these things should go. We're about to speak, well, in half an hour's time with the Commissioner, of course. And I dare say, following that at some date in the future, we'll probably want to look at this business around mental health and the changing strategy towards it. So I think it is important that we are able to build some time into that process. Paul?
A totally different issue. Is there any way the heating will be turned down before we have the meeting this afternoon? I'm just, I mean, for two reasons. One's because we're all hot, and the second one, it just seems very, very hot in here. But so I apologize. Oh, so it might be cooler then. Good.
Lovely, thank you very much, and I'll see you in half an hour.